Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and over the next half hour, we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last week or so. First up, how connected is the world today? Second, can agents always be trusted? And third, are international students being used as political pawns? Those are the 3 questions we'll be tackling today on the Midweek Roundup. For those that aren't familiar with the Roundup, welcome. If this is your first time. To those that have been subscribing to our podcast or watching us live here on Facebook, we've also expanded the galaxy of where you can catch this live event each Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, our Twitter feed for SMIE Consulting, as well as on LinkedIn for Marty Bennett. So very glad that you're with us today. I'm dropped the link to our subscription page for the SMIE Consulting Midweek Round, or the newsletter, all the SMIE news fit to share. That's the newsletter that comes out on Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern. Most of the news stories that we cover here on the Roundup on Wednesdays come out of that Monday morning newsletter. So if you'd like to subscribe to that, I'm dropping the link to that in the chat, as well as the link to the LinkedIn version of that newsletter. We've added that to the repertoire as well. So I encourage you all to check those out. And if you're subscribing through our website, through SMIE Consulting, I will also put the link to the most recent edition so you can get the news stories there as well. So in terms of what's going on today, we have 3 questions that are very much bigger picture questions that are coming out of some news stories that we've seen over the last few days, and we'll cover those here in just a moment. One of our favorite news types of stories are data stories. And for those that know me well, you know that my company's name is SMIE. SM stands for social media and international education. And in terms of where we prioritize our time, we do on the newsletter cover both social media and international education stories. When we get to the Roundup, we don't really have those blockbuster ones that we cover all too often, but we do every once in a while include a social media related story in how we answer these questions on Wednesdays during the Roundup. And how connected our world is something that I think we oftentimes ignore. We hear a lot listening to a colleague's podcast this past week with Rajika Bandari, who has written a great new kind of autobiography of her time growing up in India and then her decision to come to the United States for study for her doctoral degree. And it's called America Calling. And that's a book I certainly strongly recommended. She's also started a podcast recently called EdUp, Worldwise, and in it, she recently interviewed one of my favorites, former Education USA advisors, Rebecca Ziegler-Mano from Zimbabwe. She's American, grew up in the Bay Area, and but has lived in Zimbabwe for 25, 30, 40 years now. I'm not quite sure how long, but she was this excellent Education USA advisor. She created the USAP program, United States Achievers Program, several years ago, and has now launched her own school for education matters and providing this. That's her network that is providing low-income, high-achieving kids or no-income, high-achieving kids opportunities through her vast network of university contacts in the U.S. and abroad. She was talking about the lack of access in certain parts of the world to internet and some of the extent to which students had to go during the pandemic to find places that they don't have Wi-Fi at home, having to walk 25 miles to a place that had reliable Wi-Fi that they could then download the lessons for their A-level assignments for their school. That's how the lengths to which some students particularly the global south, have to go to get access to technology and the internet. And that's been particularly challenging when schools went online during the pandemic. If you don't have that internet access at home, don't have easy access at a restaurant nearby or whatever, there are long journeys ahead if you wanted to just be able to download the materials for your classes. I mean, that's the state of the world that we live in. Is there's a good percentage of the global south that still do not have reliable internet access. And that has an impact on their learning. And that has an impact on opportunity as well. So really kudos to Rajika for interviewing Rebecca and kind of bringing to light a lot of the challenges that students in the global south, where internet access is not as reliable, have with their educational pursuits. So in large swaths of the southern part of this world, you're going to find that, unfortunately. But on a bigger picture scale, we do see now that of the world's population, and we refer regularly to a service called We Are Social. It's a digital team headquartered in many places in the world, but started in the UK, but has operations and centers globally that really track the global state of digital, mobile, and social around the world, and produce some fascinating quarterly reports and yearly reports that document just the impact of technology on the wider world. And this most recent April edition had some fascinating stats that we'll discuss today, that we now have 5 billion people in the world. That's out of almost just under 8 billion. So about 63% of the total world's population now has access to the internet. So it's well over 60% now, on its way to 2/3. But again, still, as we talked about earlier with the global south, there's good numbers of almost 3 billion people who don't have access to the internet still. That's changing, but slowly, but we'll get there. What is also fascinating about this, there are more people who have 5.3 billion people have access to or have mobile phones, and that's 67% of the world's population. So when you take into account most preteens and younger might not have mobile phones yet, that's a good percentage of the available world population. The number of internet users, as we said, 5 billion out of that 7.93 billion people in the world. That's 63% of the world have internet access. And just behind that, at 4.65 billion, we have that many active social media users monthly. So we have 58.7% of the world are now are active social media users. And we talk about why that matters when it comes to one of the founding principles of everything I've done in international student recruitment recommendations and just connecting with audiences since mid-noughties, when social media was just catching on, is live where your audiences live. And yes, it's not going to be the same in every country, and yes, certain countries have their own social media, but the point is that's where they're spending their time. You all get your weekly reports. If you're on an iPhone, you know how many hours a week you spend looking at your screen or have attention on your screen. If you have an iPad as well, you'll get a double dose of that. But that data is readily capturable, and it's something that you regularly see. This is where in your waking hours, you're on a screen one way or another, whether it's a desktop, laptop, tablet, phone, what have you. You're spending the greater majority of your waking hours. If you're in international education, you're certainly doing that, unless you're meeting with students in person all the time. You're certainly getting more than your fair share of screen time. And your future student audiences are also spending their time online, and that's what the data really reflects. The We Are Social people also have teamed with Hootsuite on a number of their recent surveys, and they've documented just for some of the countries with significant growth, just in the last year-on-year change for social media. There are actually 7.5% more people in the world on social media than there were last year, 7.5%. That's 326 million more people have joined social media in the last year, as opposed to only 196 million getting access to the internet. So you see some very fascinating data in here, and growth of internet users over time, amount of use that folks are having on social media and internet use, where that's going. The average is almost 7 hours a day, is the amount of time everybody spends on the internet every day. So you see that has decreased a little bit in the last year, but you also see one of the unconnected populations, and we're talking about the global South again, where the largest percentage of population that are unconnected. You look at India. That's 743 million people in India still do not have internet access. So that's 53% of the population. So the majority in India are still unable to connect. China still has a substantial chunk. They've got 1 billion internet users right now, but 28% of their country still not. That's 400 million people. Pakistan, 63% of their population are not connected either. Bangladesh, 68% of their population are not connected. Nigeria, 49% of their population is not connected to the internet. Ethiopia, 75%. So you really see some dramatic numbers here. But for those that are online, when we looked at those social media numbers, those 4.65 billion people that are regular social media users, if you look at just it's even a more significant percentage when I talked about live where your audience lives on social media, they're living there. When it looks at just age 13 and up, that's kind of the minimum threshold for most social media accounts. You have to be 13. That number increases the percentage of the world population that is on social media to 75% of the eligible age population is using social media right now. So having that presence on social media certainly makes a significant difference. And in terms of the social media audience, in terms of the gender balance, we're talking a significant percent are more heavily leaning women to men. So women tend to use the internet more than men do. And that has an impact in who you're accessing using social media. So we have just some great data from the team at We Are Social. And as we do with each of these reports, we put the links to them in the chat section. So some great links, and that's already in there. So I do encourage you to check that out. Some really useful content there as you look to drill down even to country level data. You're going to find a lot of that through the We Are Social reports. So definitely a good resource to keep bookmarked, and certainly if you follow our newsletter, you subscribe to that, you're going to get that regularly in your inbox on Mondays or on your LinkedIn profile. So since we just launched that newsletter in the last, I think this is the 3rd or 4th edition. We just started at the beginning of April, and we've already, thankfully, been able to rank up about 550 subscribers through that. So thank you all who have taken the time to subscribe to the newsletter. That really helps spread the word on what's going on in international education and social media. So let's move to our second question of the day. And this is one that is a bit troubling to talk about. It's one that is a problem that hasn't gone away, and is probably a universal one to see happening every so often, and that is the issue of can educational agents always be trusted? And there are always going to be bad actors, and this is not unique to the international education profession. Certainly, every profession has their own standards now, accrediting bodies and certification bodies and that type of thing. And in this case, there's a story that comes out of India. Pi News and a number of Indian outlets picked up on this story last week. And that was a story of arrests in India after fraud claims by the U.S. Embassy, where fraudulent documents were identified by consular officers who were conducting visa interviews of prospective international students. And the local authorities were made aware of these fraudulent documents, and then local authorities have in the Punjab and also in Hyderabad have arrested several agents, educational agents. And for those that have been to India regularly, you know these the two regions in the Punjab. A lot of students from there will go to Canada, will go to the U.S. and the U.K. as well. But we also have students in Hyderabad, and that is a city in India that every street corner there are offices for dozens of agents. Most of those are unaccredited agents or unrecognized agents. The story that we're talking about today has a number of agents that are 7 police documents documenting the agents who were arrested. Seven different education agencies were paid thousands of rupees to provide the aspiring students with fake documents to support their U.S. student visa applications. So that's from the Pi News article that the Agent B, kind of an agent monitoring kind of outlet, that these 7 agents, there's only one agency, 2 people, I should say. The one agency that's listed here, Falanki Overseas Educational Advisors, that was one of the ones that was arrested. There is an Association of Australian Education Representatives in India, a body that kind of has membership. Agencies can be members of. I don't think it's necessarily certifying or accreditation body at all. It's just a membership body, but that agency that membership organization has suspended the memberships of those 7 agencies until police investigations are complete, and that they indicate that only 2 of the 7 agencies that were arrested or had individuals arrested were members of that association, the Association of Australian Education Representatives in India. There are also ARC in the U.S., American International Recruitment Council, has a certification process, and now they're going through a complaint process with 3 of their agencies that are ARC certified agencies. So there are some concerns amongst U.S. colleges, I would think, who are wondering if any of their ARC certified agencies are included in this. And that will be something that ARC will certainly hopefully conduct a thorough and efficient and effective analysis of what's been going on against these with these certified agencies that they've already vouched for. And that will raise some red flags. And unfortunately, it happens every so often, every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. There'll be stories like this that will pop up. This is the first time I'm aware that the U.S. Embassy has gotten involved and been kind of the instigator of calling out the agencies, or the students, and then getting to their agencies that they paid all the money to. Interesting that it's the agencies themselves who accepted the money from the parents to supply the documents are the ones that are being arrested, the individuals that are responsible for that, either the owners or just the actual employees that produce the fake documents. We're not sure who those people are or what level in the companies that they work for are, but we know that 2 of the Australian agents group in India, 3 of ARC's certified agents in India are under the cosh here. They're under investigation, and they're going through the relevant complaint processes and reviews, and that ARC's process is something that has to be done on the ground, and investigations will have to happen. And the Australian group has already said that they will soon be training its members on ways to verify the documents. And I don't know if that necessarily answers this question, because the the agents were the ones that produced the fraudulent documents in the first place. That is the real question on how these situations get resolved. And I'm sure AIRC has made clear that their process is confidential until their findings are released. And certainly AIRC member institutions certainly want to be made aware of what those decisions are as soon as possible, because of the impact it could have on their students if they're associated with an agency that has now been convicted or found guilty of or to have violated AIRC certifications. There's going to be contracts that are voided at many institutions from whom the agencies, these particular three agencies, if it turns out to be that they are guilty. So it's very sad that this is happening, but it does happen every so often. And it highlights, I think, more than anything else, just how vigilant we all need to be with regard to the agency selection process. There is no silver bullet that's going to guarantee you, okay, everybody you're dealing with is above board and beyond reproach. It's going to have a lot to do with how well you manage those relationships, and how it highlights the need of kind of not watchdog bodies, but certainly certification bodies, the role that they have to play now in making sure that the truth comes to light in what these agencies' conduct has been. The fees for getting certified by AIRC are not cheap, tend to be $10,000 or more for the site visits that need to happen and the review process that needs to take place. So there's a lot that goes on with AIRC certification, and these are folks that the ones that are caught can unfortunately they can pay the money to get certified and cook the books or whatever it takes to get that certification. But then if they are bad actors, they're going to get found out eventually. And that's the process. And it's always been the concern on how well individual institutions can monitor that when they don't have physical presence in those countries. They might make the rare trip, and certainly the red carpet would get rolled out for them, because the agents certainly don't want to not impress their clients. So we see a lot of potential for that certainly gives ammunition to those that have always thought that agents are the devil and the worst thing going. But the reality is they are an important way that universities in many countries, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, have recruited students for years. We're a little late to the party in the United States, a lot late to the party, 20 years late probably, but we're many U.S. institutions, over half, are now actively working with agents. So you're going to see these growing pains will happen, these unfortunate incidents happen. But hey, this happened. You look at Varsity Blues and the scandals that rocked highly selective institutions in the United States, and there were people lost their jobs, people went to jail, people have been convicted of those crimes, and hopefully, if these agents are found guilty of that in India, that and anywhere in the world it happens, that they're held accountable as well. It's just it is an unfortunate reality of life. So can agents always be trusted? I think the phrase that Ronald Reagan used during the Cold War is trust but verify. And a part of that is, you can trust, but you don't leave yourself unprotected. You got to have a process in place to make sure that who you're dealing with is who they say they are, and they're trustworthy and do things the right way. So this is there's no universals on this one, unfortunately. You could say the same thing for any profession, really, that's lawyers, certified public accountants, bankers, whoever, insurance salesmen, whoever you want to say. There are always going to be questions no matter what industry you're in. The clergy, you're going to find obviously incidents where they're not always trustworthy either. But certainly it reinforces the point that anyone that you are dealing with, they have to minimally there have to be some standards that you're applying to them. References certainly when you're going and checking out, working with a new agent. Who have they worked with? Are those universities that they've worked with been satisfied with those? So it's unlikely that any of the folks who are that are new to have been doing the agency thing for a while in the U.S. are going to be certainly affected by this. But let's hope that they aren't. But the agencies that are confirmed bad actors are the ones that will certainly pay the biggest price here. And contracts will be canceled whenever those names of any agencies that will lose accreditation with AIRC, in the U.S. at least, the U.S. institutions will quickly cut bait with those folks as well. So there's a very interesting debate on what's going on with the release of these agencies' names until investigations are complete, and what that process looks like. How long that takes, I don't know. We'll certainly find out and keep you posted when we have more information on that. So let's move quickly into our final question of the day. Are international students used as political pawns? And again, it would be nice in an ideal world to say no, they would never be used as pawns. But the reality of life and politics and certainly wars do not make us immune from this sad fact that international students are being used as political pawns. And there's a couple of examples that I'll be sharing with you here. News story first from Times Higher Ed, when we was dealing with a very real situation of Russian students in the United States and whether or not they should be kicked out. There was a U.S. politician, Eric Swalwell, that had indicated that all Russian students should have their visas revoked and sent home. That fortunately did not happen. But the article I'm referring to in Times Higher Ed is written by a colleague, former travel mates of mine in India, Anna Wise, now at Hamilton College, where she's the Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of International Recruitment. And I'd been very involved in the Foundation of Study Maryland, and was very active in getting USA a study destination, kind of larger consortium off the ground. And now at Hamilton, she has just written this op-ed for Times Higher Ed, basically making the point that we cannot treat Russian students who are here in the United States, and regardless of what their positions are, we can't universally paint them with the same brush we paint Vladimir Putin. So individual students are here studying in the U.S. They're probably worried for of their safety a little bit because about how they feel about the war. They're probably not ones who are going to be the allies of Putin in any respect. They came to the West for a reason, and that Russian and Belarusian students that are in the United States that are worried that they might be not granted admissions, and certainly for prospective students, we had a couple news stories about that a little while ago on our newsletter, because they are frankly in a tough spot. Russian students are, because they don't really have access to visas in their country, and this is before the war started. That Russian students had to go to Armenia, Romania, and I think Kazakhstan were the three countries where they could go for U.S. visa appointments, because the U.S. Embassy has cut all non-immigrant visa services in their embassies and consulates in Russia before the war started, several months before. So now they're already in a tough spot trying to get a visa, but it's only by getting to those countries, which has made particularly troublesome these days. And who knows when the war might be done in the Ukraine, but not anytime soon, it looks like. But certainly their travel to other countries is limited. Certainly not to Romania right now. There are no flights going anywhere into Europe, and certainly Armenia, maybe to Kazakhstan they can get there through land crossings, but certainly chances are Russian students are not going to be able to get visas anyway unless they're already living in other countries and not coming direct from Russia. I think the same would go for Belarusian students, but they can oftentimes get to Lithuania for visa appointments in Vilnius, but there may be some challenges there ahead too. But in terms of are they being used as political pawns? We shouldn't be using them that way. What you have seen in another country, and this is coming out of India and China, two stories that basically demonstrate the tit for tat that's going on between India and China right now. For those that have been paying attention to certainly our newsletter's been keeping you abreast of all the apps that are getting banned in India that are from China. I think there's over 50 different apps, Chinese apps, maybe 200 apps. Last time I checked, but dozens of apps that are Chinese owned are not allowed in India. And we've highlighted the story in the last couple of weeks of Indian students not getting back into China because China hosts a number of Indian students for university study. They haven't been able to get back into India, from India back into China to continue their studies. China's basically kept almost all international students out unless you're at one of the prestigious NYU Shanghai, Duke Kunshan, or one of the other British high flyers that have campuses there. But China is now starting to warm to letting certain groups of students. There's a story we just saw that some Sri Lankan students have been approved for return to China. But there's a group of Indian students that have not been able to return, and that you're seeing Indian students that trying to get back into China having to start a Twitter campaign. And this is kind of the irony of the whole tit for tat politically with between India and China. They're having to start a Twitter campaign to convince China to let them back in to finish their studies, because they can't get on WeChat, because WeChat's one of the Chinese social media platforms that's banned inside the country. So you also see another story here in the back and forth. And this story gives a number, 20,000 Indians enrolled at Chinese universities that have been blocked from returning to the country. That you now see India suspending Chinese tourist visas after Beijing had barred its students from returning. So that's another news story. I just saw that yesterday. Dropped that into the news to the chat today, because I think it's one that's very important that we all are aware of in our day to day. It's going on, and it could have rollover effects with other countries. So that's all we have for you on the Midweek Roundup this week. We're grateful that you've been able to join us for the live conversation today. And if not, thanks for listening on repeat on our major channels. And those of you who are subscribing to our podcast, audio-only podcast, appreciate you making us a part of your weekly listening habits. So thanks very much for your time today, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon. Cheers.